I'm Jerry Savage, and this is The Savage Edge. Last week, we talked a lot about the sales process, and I gave you an overview of that, beginning with what I called a discussion versus an interview. After you come in and you shake someone's hand, it's not sitting down for an interview, it's a discussion. And I talked about at the right time transitioning between those steps in the process. For instance, transitioning between the discussion into a presentation of your features and benefits of your product or service that you discovered with the customer that there was a need for. Right? So, and I said that sales was something you do for and with someone. And unless you uncover what that is, then you'll never know. And then what you're doing is that you're just deciding for that person. You become the decider, and you can't be the decider in a sales process. The customer or potential client has to decide. And it's your job to uncover that particular need or uncover a need that potentially they didn't even know that they had. And that's okay. That's the way it is. That's life. That's building a relationship. And I stopped short when we started talking about closing business. And remember, I said that I was never really comfortable with the word closed business because closed business to me was like closing a door. And really, when you close a sale, you're opening a door. You're opening a door to a new relationship. And as we go on through our careers, we're building a foundation, right? We're building a foundation, a base of business. Everybody talks about a base of business. That base of business is really just relationships that you built along the way. Now, they're built because you started out with the principles of the 4 pillars of sales: honesty, being honest with yourself before you can be honest with anybody else; integrity, doing the right thing; knowledge, being very knowledgeable about your product and the competition's product, right? And then genuine interest in people. And that's the key, guys. Genuine interest in people is a pathway to a fulfilling life and a successful career, just in my opinion. So when I stopped short of the close, it was because I wanted to circle back. Man, the reason I wanted to circle back or take a few steps backwards is because sometimes you're going to run into an objection. In fact, most of the time, you're going to run into an objection. Let's face it, in relationships, you run into objections all the time, but you solve them. One, because you trust that person if it's a good relationship and you work around that. When you run into an objection in the sales process, if you've done all the right things and you've walked through that whole process and that whole conversation with someone, that discussion, and you found the need, and you both agreed that the product or service was what the potential client or customer wanted, then when you meet an objection, you can solve that objection because the objection just means that they're on the playing field with you. Okay? They're there, they're engaged. Now, if you haven't done all that work in the beginning, then or if you were the decider and you decided that you were going to try to sell somebody, and by the way, as I said earlier, nobody likes to be sold anything. So when you agree that it's a need that solves an issue for them and that they agree with that, then if you run into an objection, you can solve it. If they haven't, and it's just wishful thinking on your part, you'll never solve it. Now, there are occasions when you might, but very few and far between. So what happens when you meet an objection? Let's just go back on the premise that we've done everything right. In other words, we were in discussion with our client, and then we uncovered a need that was going to solve an issue for them. And being the knowledgeable salesperson that you are, you demonstrated to your client a product or service and the features and benefits of that product that solve that issue, right? Now, if they gave you an objection, it's usually because you missed something. Now, if you've uncovered the right need and you've still missed something, that's okay because you can usually find out what it is. Now, it might be that they needed somebody else's opinion. And based on their personality style and the way that they like to receive information and the way that they communicate, they may be wired to do that, even though they have the authority to make a decision. They may say, I really want to talk to my partner about this, or I really want to talk to my wife about this if it's a product or service that, they're going to use in conjunction with their family. Maybe you missed that. And so now you got to go back. And how are you going to solve that? It might be a cost issue. Did you address that initially? So sometimes products have costs associated with them at different levels. Different models cost with different features cost different amounts. And did you this both agree that this was the right one? And if it was too much money, now you've got to go back and say, was that really important to them? Do they have the financial capability of spending that extra money? Now, I know in orthopedics, it was more like, I really want to use your product, but we're under contract with another company. And that's okay, right? You're like, oh my goodness, what do I do now? Because we're never going to get this product into the hospital. But I've often got around that by the fact that they had leeway that they didn't even know that they had. So you've got to become an advocate for your customer at that point. I really like to use your implant, but you're contracted with this company. I understand that you're contracted with that company. I did check with materials management, and I do know that you can go about 15% outside of that contract. And so if you have a particular patient that you know that this would benefit, then what I can do is go back to materials and talk to them and tell them that you're interested in using it, and they'll probably want to bring it to committee, and that's where we'll need your okay. Does that sound good to you? I know those of you that have been in medical device sales for a long time have had that conversation before. Now, there's another piece that comes into this objection, and it's something that happens during your features and benefits, and that's validation of the product. To overcome an objection that might be related to, geez, I'm not sure if this is going to take care of my need right now because of whatever parameters they bring up. Now you've got to go back and validate. Well, how do you validate? And what is validation? When I was showing a product to a particular surgeon in my sales career, I have my bag filled with studies and everything else. Studies are a way to validate for sure, because you can talk about the clinical aspects of your product. And if it's peer reviewed, fantastic, because you can go back and talk about peer reviewed literature, and so that it comes across and should be less biased, right? So that's one way. The other way is testimonials. You might have a testimonial from someone else that they respect. And if you've done your homework, then you probably know that up front, right? You probably know that they have respect for a certain person that might be using your product or service. And then you can use that. You can set up a phone call with the person that's using your product that they might have some respect for. You might be able to set up a call with somebody who is a designer or developer of a particular product, because they need that validation in order to feel comfortable to move forward, especially if they have to justify it, in their mind anyways, to their partner, to their institution. And so when you get an objection, you got just to remember that if you've gone down the right road in the process with them, as I described, if you've decided together with them that they need this product or service that you're talking about, and you get an objection, it's just because they're engaged. They're on the field playing the game. If you want to use the analogy of being on the playing field, that's it. They're there with you, and they want it to be a successful outcome just like you do. So remember, now, if you run into an objection, don't run away from it. Welcome it, because if they're on the playing field with you, it means there's a solution. And then together, you're going to find a solution. And that will only come if you've taken the time to build the relationship during that particular process. It goes all the way back to genuine interest in people, finding common ground. When you've done that during this discussion phase, and then you've walked through the process to do your feature benefits, and then you get to that point where you're going to ask for business and there's an objection, because you've done all those other things that I just mentioned the right way, then the objection should be welcome. And it's hard to welcome an objection, but the good thing about an objection, when you've done all the other things, is that you can find a solution, and you just have to go back and rework it just a little bit so that, you can get to that end and then come back and come to agreement that whatever that closure is, whether they're going to use your product or service, whether they're going to buy something, or they're going to move to the next level or the next level of consideration. So I would like you to think about that this week. Objections. Objections are something that you're going to get all the way through in life and sales and relationships in general, whether they're personal or business. But if they're built on trust, if they're built on genuine interest and you find common ground, there's a solution. I hope you have a great week. I'll see you next time on The Savage Edge. I'm Gerry Savage.